His name is Finn. Nobody gave him that name at first. The hospital staff gave it to him. On the third week he was there. A porter named Dennis started bringing him food. Dennis called him Finn because he said he looked like a fin. Nobody argued. By the time 8 months had passed, everyone at the hospital knew his name. They just didn't know his story. Not all of it. Not yet. Finn is a medium-sized dog. A lurcher, lean and long-legged, brindle coat, deep chest, the kind of dog built for covering ground quickly. He arrived on a Thursday in September. Not through the hospital entrance. Not through any door. He walked across the hospital car park and sat down on the pavement outside the main entrance. He sat there all day. At 5 in the evening, a security guard asked him to move. Finn moved 6 feet to the left and sat down again. The security guard went home. Finn stayed. On the second day, the same security guard brought him a bowl of water. He said later he wasn't sure why he did it. He just did it. On the third day, Finn was still there. On the 7th day, he was still there. The hospital staff began to notice. Not the dog exactly, the consistency of the dog. Every morning when the early shift arrived, Finn on the pavement outside the entrance. Every evening when the late shift left, Finn on the pavement outside the entrance. He left twice a day briefly, gone for less than an hour each time. He always came back. The staff began to ask questions. Had anyone seen him arrive with a patient? Had anyone seen him leave with anyone? Nobody had. Animal control was called in the third week. They came. They assessed him. He was not aggressive. He was not malnourished. He was thin but not dangerously so. He had no chip. No collar. The officer noted in her report, "Dog appears to be waiting for something. Recommend monitoring." She came back twice more. Both times Finn was on the pavement. Both times she left him there. Dennis the porter kept bringing food. Others joined him. A nurse on the night shift started leaving a blanket near the entrance on cold nights. Finn did not always use it. On very cold nights he did. He was practical about comfort. He was not practical about leaving. The months moved. September became October. October became November. The leaves came down from the trees along the hospital drive. Finn sat among them. November became December. The first frost came. Finn sat in it. The hospital put up its Christmas decorations. Finn sat beneath the lights. In January it snowed. The hospital car park was white by morning. Finn was on the pavement, snow on his brindle coat, not moving. A junior doctor named Sarah came off a night shift and stopped when she saw him. She crouched down. She said, "You're still here." Finn looked at her. He had heard this said many times. It was always said with a kind of wonder. Sarah went home. She came back an hour later with a proper dog bed and a waterproof cover for it. She set it up beside the entrance. Finn sniffed it. He stepped onto it. He lay down. He did not move from the entrance. By February, the hospital had developed an unofficial policy. Nobody had written it down. But everyone understood Finn stays. He was fed by a rotation of staff. He was checked on by 3 different nurses each shift. The security team had stopped asking him to move. He had become part of the hospital in the way that some things become part of a place. Not officially, not with permission, just by being there long enough and consistently enough that the place begins to organize itself around them. In March, a patient named George Alderton was moved from the ICU to a general ward. He had been in the hospital since September. 6 months earlier, George had collapsed in his kitchen. A cardiac event. Severe. He had been unconscious for 11 days. His wife had kept vigil beside his bed for those 11 days. His children had come. His grandchildren had come. The hospital room had been full of people who loved him. Outside on the pavement, Finn had been sitting. George did not know about Finn. Not yet. He had been unconscious when Finn arrived. He had been in the ICU, then in recovery, moving slowly toward the general ward. His world had been reduced to the room, the bed, the slow machinery of getting better. He had not been outside in 6 months. It was a nurse named Patricia who told him. She came in for his morning check and found him awake and looking out the window. He asked her what he could see from the main entrance. She told him about Finn. She told him all of it: September, the first frost, the snow, Dennis and the food, Sarah and the bed. George was quiet for a long time. Patricia waited. Then George asked her one question. He asked what the dog looked like. She described him, the lurcher build, the brindle coat, the lean long legs. George looked at the window for a long time after that. He said, "That's my dog." Patricia said, "What?" George said, "His name is Finn. He's been mine for 6 years." Patricia went to find the ward sister. The ward sister went to find the consultant. The consultant came to George's room. He asked George about Finn. George told him. 6 years. A lurcher. Brindle coat. He had been alone in the house when George collapsed. The neighbor had let him out. Finn had not come back. The neighbor had assumed he had run off. Nobody had known where he went. Nobody had known he was here. For 6 months, on the other side of the wall of George's hospital room, 20 meters of corridor and one exterior wall away, Finn had been on the pavement. Every day. Every night. Waiting. The consultant looked at George. George was 6 months into a cardiac recovery. He was not supposed to have emotional shocks. He was not supposed to exert himself. The consultant looked at the man in the bed. He looked at his notes. He looked at the window. Then he said, "I think we should bring the dog in." The ward sister said, "That's against protocol." The consultant said, "I know." He said it like a man who had read the protocol and decided something else mattered more. He called the hospital director. The hospital director called the infection control officer. The infection control officer reviewed the situation. She said yes. 1 visit. Supervised. In the day room at the end of the ward, Dennis the porter went to get Finn. He walked out the main entrance. Finn was on the pavement the way he always was. Dennis crouched down. He put a lead on Finn for the first time. Finn stood up immediately. He had never needed a lead before. He walked beside Dennis without pulling. Through the main entrance. Through the corridor. Into the lift. Through the ward. Finn's nose was working the entire time. Every door, every corridor, every turn. Reading the hospital. Finding something in it he had been sitting outside of for 8 months. Getting closer. Getting closer. The day room door was open. George was in a wheelchair by the window. His daughter standing beside him. Finn came through the door. He stopped. His nose went up. His whole body went still with the effort of confirming what his nose was telling him. Then he walked directly to George. No hesitation. No excitement. Just directly to him, the way a dog walks to the person who is the center of his world. George's hands came up from his lap. Both of them. He held Finn's face. Finn pressed his muzzle into George's chest and went completely still. George wrapped both arms around him. Neither of them moved. The day room went completely quiet. George's daughter had her hand over her mouth. Dennis was looking at the floor. The ward sister, who had said it was against protocol, was standing in the doorway. She did not leave. She stood there and watched. The dog who had sat on the pavement for 8 months. The man who had been 20 meters away without knowing it. 20 meters. 8 months. And here they were. George was discharged 6 weeks later. He walked out of the hospital on his own 2 feet. Finn was on the pavement when the doors opened. George stopped on the entrance step. He looked at the pavement where Finn had spent 8 months. The worn patch where the dog bed had been. Then he looked at Finn. Finn looked at him. George walked down the step. Finn walked to his left side and they walked to the car together. No leash. Just beside him. The way he had always walked. George's daughter was driving. Finn jumped into the back seat. George got into the front. Finn's chin went immediately to the center console. His eyes on George's face. The car moving away from the hospital. The pavement outside the entrance empty for the first time in 8 months. At home, Finn walked through the front door and went directly to the kitchen. He drank from his bowl. Still there, still full of water his neighbor had been refilling. He walked to the living room. He found his bed in the corner. He turned once and lay down, his chin on his paws. His eyes on George settling into his armchair. Home. George sat in his chair and looked at Finn in his bed. 8 months. A hospital pavement. The first frost and the snow and the Christmas lights and Dennis and Sarah and Patricia and a consultant who said I know and meant it. All of it leading to this. A man in his chair. His dog in his bed. the kitchen between them, and everything ordinary and quiet and returned. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone today. Finn did not know what a hospital was. He did not know which floor George was on. He did not know about ICUs or cardiac events or 6-month recoveries. He knew where George went in. He sat outside it and waited for him to come out. That was all. That was everything. There are dogs right now who are waiting outside places their people went into. Waiting at doors. Waiting on pavements. Waiting the way Finn waited. Without understanding why the wait is so long. Just knowing the person is somewhere in there. And staying. If you want more stories like Finn's every single week, subscribe. We'll be here.